Award and the Latino Book Award. In 2012, she was a finalist for the prestigious National Book Critics Circle Awards. Her works have been published internationally in countries such as Norway and South Korea. Her novels, Across 100 Mountains and Dancing with Butterflies, were published to critical acclaim and have been read widely in schools across the United States. In her memoir, published in August 2012, The Distance Between Us, Reyna writes about her life before and after illegally immigrating from Mexico to the United States. A National Book Circle Critics Award finalist, The Distance Between Us is an inspirational coming-of-age story about the pursuit of a better life. The Los Angeles Times hailed it as the Angeles ashes of the modern Mexican immigrant experience in the United States. Born in Mexico, Reyna was 2 years old when her father left for the United States to find work. Her mother followed her father 2 years later, leaving Reyna and her siblings behind in Mexico. In 1985, when Reyna was going on 10, she entered the United States as an undocumented immigrant. She later went on to become the first person in her family to graduate from college. After attending Pasadena City College for 2 years, Reyna obtained a Bachelor of Arts in Creative Writing and Film and Video from the University of California, Santa Cruz. She later received her Master's of Fine Art in Creative Writing from Antioch University. Now, in addition to being a published author, she is also an active promoter of Latino literature and is a sought-after speaker at high schools, colleges, and universities across the United States.
Hello, welcome to the show. This is The Couch. My name is Pratt, and we are today going to do the concluding part, of a series of reviewing this book, Across 100 Mountains. Across 100 Mountains. This is a book by Reyna Grande, which we started reviewing last week, and I must say that I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and of course the review as well. So last week we sort of went over the book. We did a summary of the book. We sort of tried to understand this book, and also we tried to touch on some themes of the book.
Okay.
That's where we picked your book to do a bit of characterization, but also we might end up having to look at a few themes in the process. Now, I said concluding part, of this novel, but who knows? Depends where the conversation goes, right? Because we might have to come back. Who knows? Depending on where it goes. Now, I'm saying this because this book is so rich. It's so rich culturally and also rich just in terms of the issues that it presents. I dare say that even today, 2022, a number of years after the book was written, the issues find expression very poignantly today. Now, today also we have a surprise. We have a surprise on the show. We get to do this with our regular, fellow discardants. So, of course, there's Hilda, there's Akua, but we are also joined today on the show. We need a drum roll for this, by the author herself, Reyna Grande. She's been so gracious enough to join us all the way, on today's show to give us more insights and perspectives on this book. So welcome to the show. Let's go straight in. Let me quickly introduce everybody. So I'm in studio with Hilda Smith. Hey boo.
Hey.
And of course you're going to be joined via Zoom by Akua Bobson, and I started a review with Akua last week. And then we'll be joined also by Reyna Grande. So, Hilda, let's get straight into the conversation. Who is your favorite character, from the book?
Whoa.
Straight up.
So my favorite character is Adelina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Care to share why?
No, I think that the whole thing, the way the author, weave the whole story you know, making Juana and Adelina, you know, end up being the one person. I mean, it was just so awesome. And I like the Adelina character because the Adelina character sort of like focuses on the lady who was in a search or in a pursuit of her own happiness or her own destiny. And I love the fact that how it ended. You know, she was relentless, and then, I mean, it ended well. So basically, that's how come I love her from Juana, because Juana was like this vulnerable child who, I mean, felt like a whole world was apart. You know, that's how I felt, I mean, reading the book. Her whole world was apart, and then, you know, she decided to take a step. She was more of a misery character, but I felt that the shifts in Adelina, you know, he taking on the Adelina character gave her more, you know, bold outlook on life.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, I kind of disagree with you.
Okay.
Right?
That's why we are here, right?
Yes. I mean, Adelina is a delightful character.
Yeah.
But she makes some fundamental mistakes. Adelina, the little Adelina, of course, the one that becomes the prostitute.
Oh, but that was just a little part of the whole show, because Juana becomes Adelina in the end. So that is the character I'm talking about.
Okay. And this, of course, the brilliance of Reyna Grande, isn't it? This shows the brilliance of it. No, but I mean, it's a full character, isn't it? But in the start of her life, she makes a very fundamental mistake, and I think that a lot of today's young women, you know, make also, isn't it? This thing where, you know, you sort of fall into love, and we almost do not take our heads with us. We are told that love has to do with the head and the heart. And our biggest criticism as women is the fact that oftentimes when we go into love, we go with our heart and leave our, you know, our heads behind. And in looking at the young Adelina, that teenager who falls in love, I'm tempted to say that she falls into this trap of going with her heart and leaving her head behind. Because the person that she falls in love with, you know, and last week I said this, for me is one of the most repulsive characters, you know, in the book. And I wonder how it is that she falls, I mean, so hopelessly in love with this person, runs away from home, you know, goes to Mexico, leaves the US, goes to Mexico to live with this person, realizes he's a pimp, you know, and is still in love with him, even to the extent that when her friend even tells her that he raped me, there's a point at which I sense a bit of hesitation. Sort of disbelief. How can you disbelieve? I mean, when people show you who they are, you're supposed to believe them, no? So that's my thing about Adelina. And in as much as her situation is very bad and it's terrible and all of that, just as one can't help but feel a sense of hers is sort of self-imposed, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that. You know, I think that sometimes when we are in love, it takes us to very interesting, you know, places. And funny enough, yesterday on the radio, you know, one of these talk shows that people send in letters, a very similar story was being played out. And I'm like, oh, okay, so we are in 2020, this is Ghana, this is very current. A young girl was asking for advice. This is a guy who is maltreating her. This is a guy who is harassing her, asking her for money, of all things. And still, this girl is saying that the guy sent her, what they called, a message to say that don't call me, don't text me again. And the girl is so worried because this, after narrating all that the guy does to her, she still answered that, I still like him. I want to kill myself if he's not in my life. So sometimes I think that when people feel limited, okay, by the fact that this is the one for me, you know, by whoever standard or whichever standard that they believe that this is the one for me and there's no other, then what becomes of it? They feel that they have to protect that thing with all their might. And in the case of the other Adelina, it didn't end well for her, you know. So, yeah.
Okay. So for you, your favorite character is Adelina.
The Quanua graduated to Adelina.
You mean the
Adelina we meet right from the get-go. Did you get the distinction though?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So the Adelina we are
sort of merge into.
It's the same character with different names. Yeah.
That merge into the same character. Okay. So for you is Adelina. Okay. Well, let me take Akua's perspective on this. Akua, are you on the line? Can we take Akua's perspective on this?
Mama, can you hear me?
Yes, Akua, I can hear you. Thank you for joining us via Zoom.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm interested. I mean, we've been talking about, Adelina. Hilda says it's her favorite character, and I just need to hear your perspective, on that.
Well, I think yes, she's definitely my favorite character. Well, Adelina being Quanua, right? Not Adelina being Adelina herself.
Right. Yes.
So that would definitely be my favorite character. I think you see a lot of growth in her character, as well as you see a development in her character. Her character actually develops as the story goes on. So that's definitely my favorite character. She's strong, she's brave, and she doesn't buckle in the face of all the trials that come her way.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to think up 2 more characters that you like. At this point, I really would love, to hear from our author herself. So, Reyna, if you are online, we would like to hear from you. And please do permit me. The thing you do with the characters, these 2 characters that we meet individually, and they sort of merge to become one character. That's just so brilliant, and I need you to expand on why you chose that particular technique for this book.
So much for having me, and thank you for reading my book as well. Across 100 Mountains is a story that first began as it was inspired by my own experiences living in poverty in Mexico, and then immigrating to the United States, coming to live in Los Angeles. So I wanted to capture what it's like for children who are living in those circumstances. A lot of poverty. Their parents have to go somewhere else to try to find a better life for them. And for many of these children, their parents don't come back. And that was something that I was afraid of when I was a child, was that my father wouldn't come back. Luckily, my father did return to Mexico when I was 10, but in Juana's story, her father never returns. And so I wanted to explore that an alternate reality for me, because a question I always had as a child was, what would have been of my life, right, if my father wouldn't come back for me. So that's where the story was born. And when I first started the novel, it was just going to be about Quanua. It was just going to be her story. But then as I began to work more and more, Adelina appeared to me, and I wanted to write her story. And then, of course, along the way, I started to think about how immigrants tend to have double identities. We always have 2 identities. We're always split in half. Half of our hearts is still in our homeland. The other half is in the new country that we have immigrated to. And then we sometimes, when we are undocumented, we end up using somebody else's identity to work. So then there's always this duplicity, right? This two identities. And that's where the idea came for me to give Quanua two different identities as well.
I have to say that you just met your biggest fan, perhaps. You know, I have to say it. I find the technique so brilliant. And last week we spoke about that, as myself and Akua, and how very effective that technique has worked out so brilliantly. In this book, I talk too much. Let me let Hilda have a say on technique as well, and Akua too. We need to tell the author exactly how we feel about the book.
She mentioned the duplicity because I think that it was one of the brilliant techniques that she used, and I actually don't think about the fact that, like, when people find themselves in different countries and all that, they sort of take on different identities. Until now, like, she just saying that just blew me away. She brought it to life. I actually didn't think in that direction when I was reading the book. I just felt that, like, okay, this is like somebody who loved the friend so much, and because the friend passed, she took on the identity. But she just explaining the fact that, like, most people who travel, sometimes end up taking on other people's or new identities, just makes the story even superb. Because then it's not only just talking about two characters and what they've been through, but she just throws it into, like, the wider scope of looking at immigration and the challenges and its associated stresses. Right. So it's not just about these two characters, but immigration and its challenges as well. It's so brilliant. I love it.
Right. Now, at this point, I have to ask you this question, right? Because Hilda, in analyzing the character Adelina, sort of makes a distinction. I think Akua does the same thing. They make a distinction between Adelina the child and Adelina the adult, the one that comes back as Quanua back into her space. Now, I mean, these are your characters. Are you happy when we make this clear distinction, or would you rather we take sort of Adelina as? And let me tell you why I say this. I am in love with Adelina the adult, but I have my reservations about Adelina the child and the choices that she makes. How do you feel about that? Do you think I'm being a little too harsh with the character, or do you think that we should separate the two characters and not treat them as one?
Yeah, I think I really like Quanua myself when she was a child, because I based Quanua on me and my sister, because we went through that experience when we were little girls. We went through the experience of, being very poor, living in Mexico, and seeing our family break apart when my father immigrated to the U.S. and then my mother also immigrated to the U.S. So my siblings and I, we were left behind on our own mostly, and it was a very difficult childhood being separated from our parents. So when I wrote Quanua's chapters when she was a little girl, they came straight from my heart. I was really writing about how I had felt when my father left, and then also feeling how little by little her mother falls apart, and I got to experience that as well with my own mother. And I didn't really grow up having my mother or having her support. I wasn't very close to her, so I felt very attached to Quanua, more than when she gets older, and she becomes Adelina. That was very different.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. Now, Akua, let me bring Akua in. Akua, who would your favorite character? Actually, no, Akua said her favorite character is Adelina too. let's talk about some other characters then. Akua had some interesting perspectives about Lupe, Lupe's character. Akua, if you would, join us again. What are your specific feelings about Lupe? And do you have any questions of Reyna concerning that character?
Yes, so I think Lupe is a mother who's going through some form of depression. I mean, she's just lost 2 children, one a baby that drowns. She didn't see that coming. Her husband just disappears into thin air. She doesn't get to know whether he arrived safely in the US, whether he died, because there's some closure that comes with knowing that somebody has died, rather than waiting to hear from them and then not actually hearing anything about whether they made it to the other side or didn't. So she's already dealing with 2 deaths of 2 children, and then the possible death or disappearance of her husband. And then there's Don Elias, who comes in and takes advantage of this really poor woman who has only a teenage daughter to take care of. So you see a woman who's going through so many different, really traumatic, really heavy situations, and being forced to do something that she doesn't want to do. And you see Don Elias taking advantage of not just her, but also women in the same vulnerable position in the town. But for her in particular, there's all this other stuff that's really she's going through a really traumatic situation. So I see a woman who is traumatized, who's depressed, and who no longer has a sense of even well-being, because she doesn't seem to even realize what is going on with her, what's going on with her daughter. And so it's really tragic to see her character and to see how Don Elias takes advantage of her, and not just that, but to take away her child, who actually isn't his child. So that's really something difficult. Any mother who has to part with a baby, that's a really traumatic situation. So we see this evil man come in at a point when she's at her lowest and take advantage of her. So that's essentially like a really painful thing for me. And Lupe, I think, went through a lot. And Quanua went through a lot as well. But I wouldn't even, there's no but. Both of them really went through really terrible things. But Lupe, in that situation, it was a horrible situation. I didn't say but, it's just a really horrible situation for both of them.
How do you feel? Thank you, Akua. How do you feel about Lupe? How do you feel about, because last week Akua made the point that there were instances where she wanted to sort of tell Lupe that just leave, when she knew that Don Elias was going to come to the house, there were times where, and I felt the same way. There were times when I also felt that, especially when she got into alcoholism, and I understand her pain and I understand her frustration, but there were times when I also felt that, can you at least try for one's sake, so that there are so many emotions that come up when it comes to Lupe. There are moments when I really feel sorry for her and I'm with her, and there are moments when I feel like, come on, for the sake of your child, can you get it together, right? How do you feel about Lupe?
I think that Lupe epitomizes motherhood, the complexities of motherhood, and then you try to distinguish that with being a woman, without all the strings attached. And I think that the struggle there was really real, because she couldn't bring herself to, she couldn't separate herself from the 2 roles. Like, what does she want and what does her daughter need? You understand? So I think that it got to a point that I felt she was being irrational, but to some extent, when she was able to start the man, I realized that no, she had it all, all this while, but just that she didn't know how to handle all the emotions that came at her. And we didn't see any sort of real support system for her, because if you realize, Appa's her mother-in-law was very mean to her, right? Like right from the get-go. So who does she turn to?
And she had a friend who stopped talking to her, when she thought that she was living with Donna.
Exactly. So you realize that when people are going through stuff and they don't have anybody to turn to, they tend to live in their own head. You understand? Because you can't go in and burst out to your child. But how will your child even understand? Because in some instances, you know, when she asked Quanua to leave because Don Elias was coming, you know, she knew what Don Elias was coming to do to her and all that. But yet still, she asked Quanua to leave. And Quanua is like, hey, why? Are you going to do this to my dad and all that? But at that moment, she felt like she had no choice. Then again, if she was running, looking at the kind of man that this Don Elias man is, like, he sort of owned the whole town. So there was no way. People were not giving them jobs, you understand, because the man caused that she should be let go at the job that was giving her something small. So there was really nowhere for her to go. Right. Maybe she could also have said, okay, I'm leaving my child with my mother-in-law and also crossing to crossing the border to the other side. She could have taken that decision, but she didn't. But she chose to stay on rather and then suffer through it all.
Right. Now let's bring Reyna here. Let's look at the character of Lupe, you know, Ama. And Hilda just said something here that is very instructive to me that perhaps I didn't, you know, take my mind to when I was reading. That distinction between self as a woman and motherhood, you know, because Lupe has her own story. You know, Lupe has her own, you know, story of, you know, misfortune from when she's born to when she goes. You know, she's dealt with poverty in all of its shapes and all of its forms. She meets a man that she loves, you know, she's trying to get it together. But then Lupe as a mother also has very specific, you know, challenges where she's losing her children and she's having to care for children in extreme, you know, poverty circumstances. Now, that distinction between Lupe's self, you know, herself as a woman, Lupe, and her role as a mother, you know, is that something that you did deliberately, or did it just happen in the course of writing?
Yeah, no, you know, at first I was gonna base Lupe on my own mother, because my mother actually left Mexico when I was 4, and she went to the United States. But when I was writing the novel, I decided that instead of having Lupe also immigrate and leave, that she was going to stay with Quanua. But because of all the difficulties that she was dealing with, not hearing from her husband, you know, having to fall prey to Don Elias and all of these things, that she was going to lose herself in the process, right, of trying to survive, of trying to be this mother to Quanua, but also a woman who is succumbing to her own depression about not knowing where her husband is and being left in very difficult circumstances. So I had a lot of compassion for Lupe, and as the story progressed, I also wanted to capture what Juana's experience was like in seeing her mother fall apart, not being able to help her, you know, even though she's really trying, but Quanua is also dealing with her own traumas. And at the end, you know, Quanua, kind of the roles kind of switch, where Quanua becomes the parent, and Lupe becomes the child that needs to be taken care of. So that's kind of it evolved. The story evolved very naturally in that way. But to me, it was important to write about the women who are left behind, you know, because it's such a common experience in terms of women who are left in very difficult situations when they're husbands leave somewhere else, when they immigrate, and then they don't know what's going to happen to the family. You know, women are left with a lot of responsibility and in hard circumstances that, you know, sometimes um, a woman just gets lost in all of that as she's struggling to survive and as she's struggling to keep her children also alive. So I I wanted to write a book that really honored the experiences of the wives that are left behind, but also the children that are left behind.
I think this is the point I have to say congratulations to you, because I think that you outdid yourself. You did it, you know, and it's relatable even to us, you know, here in Ghana, in Africa. I dare say in Africa, it's a common thing, you know, it's a common theme that all of us are used to, you know, that I mean, motherhood, you know, and the struggles. I mean, and on this continent, perhaps, you know, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of struggle, there are issues, right? And it's layered. But then I dare say that a woman's struggle, and particularly a mother's struggle, is always the toughest. And I think that you achieve, you know, that brilliantly with this one. I would ask you a last question, and Hilda would come in. And it's also, again, something that came up in our conversation last week. Would you say that love is a theme in this book? As you were writing, would you say that love, you know, can be considered a theme? I say yes. Everybody says no. Akua says no. Hilda says no. I think that love can be a theme. You are the author. Is love a theme in Across 1,000 Mountains?
Yeah, I mean, I think love is a very strong theme in the book. You know, there's a lot of love between Quanua and her father, and a lot of love with Quanua and her mother, and then the parents too, right? The parents love each other very much, and I would say that it's because of love that also the family falls apart, because the father loves his family so much that he wants to give them something better, and he has not been able to do that in his own country, and so he makes that decision to leave his family to try to find something better for them, and that decision comes out of love. And the irony is, you know, and it's an irony that all of us immigrants experience, is that sometimes in trying to save the family, we end up destroying the family by immigrating, you know. And that has been the case with my own family. I have seen it happen over and over, and it's difficult for families when immigration comes into our lives, and immigration, you know, causes a lot of separation, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of sorrow, and for families to overcome that trauma from the immigration experience is very difficult. So sometimes we do end up destroying the family that we love because of these very difficult decisions that have to be made in order to try to save the family. So to me, you know, everything that happens in the book happens out of love, right? And even Juana having to go on her own to try to find her father by herself. I mean, that is an act of love. And even, you know, Lupe, in the way she falls apart, it's because of love as well. You know, all of these circumstances that happen, some of it, you know, because she loved her husband so much, because she loved her children so much, she also ended up falling apart because she wasn't able to save them in a way that she wished she could save them.
So, I mean, okay. So now let's look at our least favorite characters, because there are some characters in between that we'll probably come back to later. Least favorite character. Let me start. Yes.
Before we go to least
Right.
favorite character. Okay, can we ask her who her least favorite character?
Oh, we'll come back. Let's do our pick.
Okay.
Let's give her the last,
Okay.
the last say. And so I would start.
Okay.
And it's a tough race. It's a tough one. It's a tough one between Don Elias and Adelena's boyfriend. Is it
Sebastian?
No, not the doctor. Not the doctor.
So
the pimp.
Oh, okay. I don't even remember that guy.
I deliberately decided not to keep his name. I'm sorry. So him, right? It's a tough call between the two, and I pick the boyfriend. I pick the boyfriend because he preys on children, teenagers, and for me that's the worst kind of law. Don Elias is terrible, but at least he's dealing with women. At least he's dealing with women. But this one is using love. Don Elias comes at you from the get-go. You know that this is somebody that is horrible. He's here to exploit. He doesn't hide who he is. He comes to you straight up. And so when you are dealing with him, you know who you are dealing with. However, this boyfriend comes to you from a place of love. At least he went to the Adelina from a place of love. I love you. They start a relationship. She gets this young teenager to leave her home, leave her parents, and follow him to Mexico. And there he decides to pimp her. And not just that. He benefits off of, her trade as a prostitute. And then he beats her up. He beats her up all the time. And, I mean, in the end, I think he kills her.
Mm-hmm.
He actually kills her. And the sad thing about his character for me is the fact that sometimes they tend to get away with these ills. They tend to do these obnoxious things, and the system just allows them, to keep at it. And even when he rapes Quanua, there's some nonchalant, attitude about, like, it's as though this human being has just sold his conscience, and there's no conscience, and he's just existing to be evil. And I said this last week, I found that character the most repulsive, and there are quite a number of them in the book. Of course, I spoke about Don Elias earlier. There are the coyotes who can end up killing you on the way. There's the mother-in-law who is not supportive, who is just, mean. There's Don Elias' wife. I don't understand what her deal is anyway. So there are a number of them. But for me, my least favorite character would have to be the racist pimp.
For me, the racist pimp and Don Elias are one and the same. Yeah, because it's like one is very wealthy, so he uses the influence of money. The other one doesn't have money, so he uses maybe he has good looks, so he uses it to attract the young girls and pimps them. Both of them have the same characters if you look at it. Because Don Elias was described in it, he's almost had his way with all the women, and his wife, knows about it, all because he's trying to
cover up
his impotence.
I think, yes.
You understand. So, for me, both of them are repulsive characters in the book. And funny enough, society has these characters who are still around, who are still perpetuating such crimes. And most of them, as you sadly said, go scot-free. So for me, both of them, I can't distinguish between who is. I don't like any of them. But funny, you mentioned Don Matilde. At first I also did not like her, but to some extent I understood her. Not that she's my favorite character, but I understood the character. To be with a man that has shamed you in such a manner, you couldn't leave, because of course if you left, you would not have anything. Basically, you don't want to live that life and then go and be you don't want to be that man's enemy. You rather be on his side seemingly than to be on the other side of the man. And for me, I think that she felt like she had to hold on to something, at least to cover up for all the humiliation and everything. I believe that as a woman, she also knew that her husband was impotent. but for the fact that she also wanted a child so bad, and so she went to claim the child with her husband, with Lupe. You know, in the end, it did turn out well for the child, though. You know, because at the end of it all, he had a better life than perhaps he would have had with Lupe. Because Lupe, I mean, looking at the process that she was going through, there was no way that she was going to have been able to give these children the life that they so wanted.
But Hilda, don't you think that it was taking him, I mean, and she named him after her husband, Appa. Don't you think it was taking him from Lupe that sort of degenerated, you know, her condition? That's what made her an alcoholic. That's what made her depressed. And I dare say that's what even gave her mental, you know, because I think that at some point there were some mental challenges with Lupe.
I think that
had the baby been with her, do you think that Lupe would have become what Lupe became?
Lupe was going mental right from when she lost Anita. If you notice, she was not even speaking to Juana. She only started speaking to Juana when Appa left, you know, and then even that was not really, so she was depressed right from the get-go. And we had to have the explanation that Lupe had I mean, several losses. So she was depressed and she needed somebody to, so maybe you can say this was the last straw.
Right.
But that woman was degenerating through the losses of her children. Right. Yeah.
Let's bring in Akua at this point. Akua, who would your least favorite character be, you know, in this novel?
Hi, I'm
Your least favorite character, Akua?
Oh, my least favorite character. That's easy. Definitely Don Elias.
Sorry.
Definitely Don Elias and Gerardo.
Gerard, that's the name. Yes.
Those are the two men that are typical of men who take advantage of weak women. I mean, Gerardo, it's completely, you can't understand why, why he would bring a girl who's in love with him, his girlfriend, across borders in a reverse immigration way or migration way to Mexico and then pimp her out. And it's not like we haven't had stories like this before. There are stories in which men pimp out their wives when they travel abroad. But it's a bit unexpected as well because it's reverse immigration, like I said, and you don't expect him to take advantage like that of a young girl. But then again, we always hear stories like that. Yes, and definitely Don Elias, I think we've talked extensively about him and what a horrible person and an evil person he was. I mean, even if you take away all the rape and everything, the fact that he was charging so exorbitantly and putting other people in debt over something as normal, I should say, as a funeral, because people die all the time. So are you going to put everybody in debt just for burying their loved ones? So he's a completely awful character who shows how people tend to take advantage of others when they are in their most vulnerable state.
Okay, this will be the point at which we bring in Reyna herself. Would it be too presumptuous to ask you who your least favorite character is? Who's the character that you created, that you had problems creating? Who's your least favorite character in your book?
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree. You know, Don Elias is definitely my least favorite character too. But he represents people, and not just people, but institutions, you know, that take advantage of vulnerable people. And I wanted to really illustrate how even within like a community, somebody's community, there's always somebody who has more power, who's always trying to prey upon the most vulnerable in the community, take advantage of them. Um, so that to me is what he represented, but you know, he also represented on a larger scale the 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 systemic oppression, you know, institutional oppression that poor people have to are victims to, right? So I didn't like him. It was difficult for me to see, you know, my characters like Quanua, Ama, having to fall prey to Don Elias, and to see them being taken advantage of. Um, One of my favorite characters is Sebastian. You know, when Adelina meets Sebastian, I really wanted that relationship to work out because she deserves some love. You know, she deserved a good man. She deserved to be happy. She deserved to have a chance to build a life and a family with someone, and to be loved, you know. But she was not in that place yet where she felt that she could allow herself that relationship, you know, that she could love and be loved by Sebastian. She wasn't there yet because she was still trying to find her father, and she was still determined to try to put her family back together. And so she missed out on that chance for happiness herself, and you know, she turned away from it.
Sorry to cut in though, but I think that in the end you left a window open for Sebastian and Adelina. I think you left a small window open where it looked as though there's a possibility, you know, of that love blossoming, you know.
I I left the ending kind of open because I I started to think about after this moment, right? What if she returns to the U.S. and she finally allows herself to to have this relationship with Sebastian? Um, and what if she's able to also have a relationship with her brother? You know, so that's kind of what I was seeing for them later in the future. So I wanted to make sure that in the end, you you kind of don't know what happens after, but I wanted the reader to imagine a good ending for Juana, and for Juana Adelina, you know, and for her to finally find some happiness.
I did just that. I don't know about Akua and Hilda, but I did just that. I filled in the blank, so I know how it ends. In the end, you know, she and her brother are the best of siblings. She goes back and she falls in love with Sebastian. They have 3 children and they live happily ever after. Hooray! So let me take questions. I'm the one who's been asking all the questions. Let Hilda and Akua both ask you a question each. So Hilda, you first.
Reyna. So I just want to find out about the Don Ernesto character. You know, this is somebody who was so generous, took on Adelina Juana, you know, as his own, and then left her an inheritance of $6,000. Is it $6,000? Can you give me an insight into what went into writing the character of Don Ernesto? Okay, so I was trying to find out from you what went into developing or writing the character for Don Ernesto. You know, somebody who was so generous, you know, so kind, took on the Adelina Juana character, took care of her like a father and all that, like his own, give her a roof, and even went as far as leaving her an inheritance of like $6,000. That's a lot of money, you know. And I just wanted to understand, you know, the thought processes that went into writing that character.
Hi, Renee. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So Hilda had a question for you. Hilda wanted to know about the character Don Ernesto. You know, he's like the ray of sunlight. You know, somewhere in there where he takes on the little girl. You know, gives her a roof over her head, takes care of her. You know, even dies and leaves her an inheritance of $6,000. And Hilda would really like to know why that character, and perhaps what that character represents or symbolizes, you know, in the story.
Yeah, I really loved Don Ernesto. I loved his kindness, you know, and how he quickly realizes that Juana Adelina is someone who needs his help, and he immediately begins to help her. You know, he takes her in, he gives her a home, he gives her guidance and love and support and advice. And I think for me it was really important to show that with Don Elias, you know, I know that there's people who take advantage of others, but then there are also people in our communities who help us. You know, there are people in our communities who really do want to give the best of themselves, to be in service to others, to always realize when people need help that they're there, you know, and they're ready to help and willing to help. So that's what who Don Ernesto was in the book. I myself, when I was a young person, I was 18, I had a teacher who helped me a lot, and she also took me to live with her, and she gave me a lot of love and support when I most needed it. And so Don Ernesto is someone like my teacher, you know, who was very giving, who was very loving, who had such goodness in his heart that everybody in his community, and especially, you know, Juana Adelina, loved him very much. And it was, for me, it was a way of showing how we could be somebody's Don Ernesto, right? We could always be ready to help someone in need.
That's beautiful. Akua, would you have a question for her?
Yes, I want to know if you will be writing a sequel. I mean, it doesn't sound like it from what you say about how Sebastian and Adelina's relationship ends.
Right.
And I actually I like stories that, or books that leave things hanging, because sometimes we don't get answers, or the answers we want in real life. So
Right.
I don't like stories that end on a too...
Stories that are too sweet, you mean?
Yeah.
But I do want to know if you intend to write a sequel to the book.
Not right now. I haven't thought about it. I have, you know, I have been writing some other stories recently. But if you want to know more about the inspiration for Across 100 Mountains, I did write 2 memoirs after Across 100 Mountains. I wrote The Distance Between Us, which is, this is my own story of living in Mexico when I was a child, and then coming to the United States and growing up as an undocumented immigrant in California. And then I wrote a sequel called A Dream Called Home, which captures my experiences of going to college, trying to become a writer, trying to to be an artist, you know, and to really like pursue my dream of being able to publish my stories. And this one does have a happy ending because I write about uh, um, finding a person to love and who loved me very much, and it does have a happy ending. You know, this the love story in here is very happy. This is what I had. Yeah, this is what I wish for Quanua to have. Yes, the happy ending. You know, where she finally has some love and someone to love her.
So we are definitely going to grab, these two books, The Distance Between Us and A Dream Called Home. I have to let you know, sort of be a little birdie that whispers in your ear that I love, 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 So we are definitely going for the one that has the love theme. We are out of time, unfortunately, and it's because of all the technicalities we had, with the Zoom and all of that. We are out of time, but we can't leave. We can't leave without asking you to read us a line or two, from the book. So please, if you'd be gracious enough, if you could just read us, something from the book.
Okay, from Across 100 Mountains.
Yes, yes, yes.
Let me see. Okay, how about I read the last lines of the ending?
Okay, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Adelina took a breath of the ocean scent. The smell reminded her of Sebastian. He had said he would wait for her. Juana turned to look at the ghostly moon that was now preparing to begin a new journey across the sky. She breathed in the ocean air and felt the spray on her legs as the waves crashed on the rocks below.
I mean, and I have to say that the ending of the book is so poetic, right? It's so poetic the way you end the book, where the two siblings, the brother and the sister, they walk to the ocean, and then in their hands they have the ashes of their parents, and especially for the mother, Lupe, who has always yearned to go and at least dip her legs, in the ocean, that she can't do that in her life, but she's able to do that in death because her two children, both that she lost at some point. She lost, Miguel when he was born, and then he lost one along the way. That both of them come together, holding, the ashes of their parents. They go to the seaside, and then they sort of just, leave it up there and let their parents enjoy the ocean. It's beautiful, the way the story ends. I have to say, I'm one that doesn't like sad stories, and so I was telling both Hilda and Akua that it was hard for me reading this book, but it's beautiful. I find the love, and also, the end. So I have to say congratulations to you, and I have to say thank you so much to you that you made time, today to be here with us. Unfortunately for you, Reyna, now that we have you, we would be calling on you every now and then, considering also that you have other books that I'm sure we would love, So thank you so much. Thank you. Grateful for the book and grateful for your time. Last words, and then we are out.
Much. I'm really, it's just such an honor to be here in conversation with you and talking about Juana and Adelina and Don Ernesto and Lupe and all of these characters that are very dear to me. And this book is very special to me because it was my very first book. And when I was writing it, it was a labor of love, I didn't know if I was going to be able to publish it or not. It was just me and my book. And I was afraid that maybe I wasn't able to finish it, that I didn't know how to write a book. So when the book was published, I became a published author. You know, this was the book that started my career as a published author. And so I have tremendous love for my first book, and it taught me that I could write a book and that I could publish a book. And ever since then, I I I have felt a lot of courage in terms of being able to put my stories out there and know that readers are going to like the stories, that it's going to touch their hearts, that it's going to make them think about the world in a different way, and it's going to inspire them as well. So I'm very grateful to you for having read Across 100 Mountains.
Well, congratulations to you, because you did all of that and so much more. And you won a couple of awards, so congratulations, you know, for those awards as well. As winner of the American, you know, a book award and all of that. But I can't take all the credit. We have to give a lot of the credit to Akua, you know, who actually suggested the book, and to Hilda, who insisted, you know, that we read this book. Thank you so much. We'll call on you again. Thank you for watching the show. We will come back. We will see you next week. Thank you, Akua, and thank you, Hilda. Always a pleasure. See you.
Welcome to Calm Trading and Farms Limited. We are the sole importers and distributors of FM World Rulong Plus Plus combined harvesters. We are the sole importers and distributors of FM World combined machines. If you buy from us, spare parts are readily available. Our machines can pick and harvest logged rice as well as standing rice, and is 102